Kia ora, Greg. I'm not sure where Greg's disappeared to. Kia ora, Greg. I hope you can hear us. Pretty elusive. While Greg is trying to join from that satellite city of Warkworth, we'll pass the time over to you, Danielle, and give you an opportunity to reply to all these good people. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora tātou. Thank you so much for a warm welcome, and I'm honoured to be here. Ko Mangatautari te maunga, ko Kaipara te awa, no whangarei ahau, ko Hancock toku whānau, ko Daniel toku ingoa. And I'm sitting here right now looking out my window at the southern end of the Kaipara Harbour. Nice beautiful day. And I can't wait to meet you in person and tell you about all the things that I've done in my life that has supported, benefited the Kaipara. I've been to high school in Dargaville, and we had a dairy farm with the Northern Wairau on our boundaries. And I spent most of my career working on catchment management and sediment reduction and doing everything I can for our environment. So this is a pleasure and a treat and an honour to be part of this group and to be working with you and to support communities and landowners to do everything we can to help keep doing the good work that we're doing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Danielle. Kia ora, Greg. I hope you've managed to connect. We've taken some time to introduce ourselves to Danielle Hancock, our Rodney local board member of the Joint Committee, and pass the time over to you before we make a start on our agenda proper. Kia ora. But that doesn't seem to be hitting any sort of a sweet spot at all. So, Sandra, I just wondered if we could put our agenda up. There's a couple of things I wanted to add, and it's I'm not sure where that title in Mardi has suddenly appeared from. Certainly didn't come from the communications group, but for a start, it's completely wrong. The title that's across the top of our agenda. No way do we represent anything in the taitokoro. And the last thing we want is an argument with these people based in Kaihu. Right. They have a propensity to carry on and on and on and on, dragging unnecessary arguments. So the least we can entice them, the better it would make our lives. So we've got a complicated enough situation with our own lot, apart from us claiming. I'm talking about the title on the agenda proper. If you roll it down, keep going. Right there.
Yeah.
You see it? Yeah. That we don't have a Māori name. We've purposely kept it Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee. We've given our operational unit a Māori title, Kaipara Māori kura. But I just think it's an important point not to have too many red rags hanging around the place. Seems to attract all sorts of negative responses. So that was really the first point. And the other little point I wanted to make was, I think we should make provisions for a general business section on all our agendas, and it's something that came up this morning that I'd like to put on as part of general business for discussion. But I did notice we didn't have a general business or other matters section in our agenda. That was all from me, and I have a run sheet, and we'll pretty much try and run our meeting accordingly. I see a little message from Greg saying he's got a bad internet connection, so we take however he can or whenever he can connect. We'll run with that. So I take it there are no apologies, or are there any comments before we?
No apologies from my end.
Okay.
Do you want the apologies moved, Tammy?
Oh, there's no apologies, so we'll just
Go on.
move on, and I guess there is a step that we should set a motion to approve electronic attendance. Someone like to move that?
I
Yeah,
will,
kia ora.
Virginia.
Yeah, second Willie.
Okay, moved Virginia, seconded by William, that we approve the electronic attendance for KMR Joint Committee, Monday the 20th of September. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against, any abstentions? Okay. All declarations of interest. Any declarations, please declare as they arise and complete the declaration of interest forms. Return those to Sandra Harris. Confirmation of the minutes from the 22nd of July. Someone move confirmation of those minutes?
I'll move, Tame. Penny.
Penny Smart, there a seconder?
Kia ora.
Seconder by Amy McDonald. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against, any abstention? That's carried. So any discussion, any matters arising from the minutes?
Just a comment from me, Tammy, it's Willie. Probably not a biggie. Those in attendance, Winnie Clark is actually O Ture Marae, not Ture Ho Settlement Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just on that note, Tom, probably Lizette Rawson, that's perhaps meant to say to Ururako
Yeah.
rather than Te Urioho.
Yeah. True. Did you get that, Sandra?
Te Ururako.
Yep, got them. Thank you.
Any other matters arising from the minutes?
Kia ora, through the chair. Just a correction on the second of, let me see, what is it? 5.1. This is the brand and the identity communications. Yeah, it was Penny Smart that moved and I seconded. Kia ora.
Okay.
Thank you.
No further matters out of the minute.
Kia ora through the chair, aroha mai. I've seen that on 4.1 that I moved the minutes for the 25th of June. I actually wasn't at that hui on the 25th of June. And I don't remember moving those minutes.
Where?
Kia ora, same.
We need to
Kia ora, Kia ora, through the chair. I thought that on this particular meeting on the 22nd July, Cherie and I were sitting beside each other, so I had thought that Sandra may have not realised that I had moved the minutes.
Jane was at the hui, I wasn't.
So if you could correct that I moved the minutes and Amy McDonald seconded.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Got that, Sandra?
Yep, thank you.
Very good. Any other matters arising?
Ka hoi.
Okay. Thank you for that. Moving to agenda item 5.1 and pass it over to Alan Wilcox as the acting Poutātaki, and basically to give us an outline of the Whenua Whānui Fund in terms of support for marae community groups across the restoration, remediation efforts for Kaipara Moana. So that's on your page 8 of your meeting papers, and thank you. Pass it over to Alan.
Kia ora tame, kia ora koutou anō. We've had a number of workshops on this already, so I'll just quickly encapsulate, if I can, the key dimensions of it, and then allow turn it over to you for discussion. So I guess there's two ways in which we're able to get remediation activities at the moment out into the community, or two main ways. One is through the Landowner Grant Scheme, which we've approved, and we've started to have a trickle of applications coming through, settlement reduction plans. We've had 2 or 3 reiterations of criteria, and there's still some criteria that we're thinking through, and we'll need to bring back to you again in due course, just as we learn as we move forward. The second way, of course, is through the Whenua Whānui Fund, which we're suggesting can address not only landowners, but more in particular community hapu marae groups and others that may not have access to commercially productive land. So what we've suggested is that any group that can make a contribution can be potentially recipients of this fund. We still need to address a number of principles, though, which we've identified at the bottom of page 8 and top of page 9 there. While we will consider a broad range of groups, we need to be clear that there's not unlimited funds, so we don't want to create expectations in such a way that people are coming to us for sort of millions of dollars. We are still needing to have matched funds from the landowner or the community on a 50-50 basis. We can provide for settlement reduction plans to be done, and when we make allocations, it's suggested that the Joint Committee look at the size of the sedimentation issues and the overall impact if there's a need for prioritisation. That's unlikely to happen in the first year of operation of this fund, which hopefully will be this year. But at the same time, in future years, that may become important. Perhaps there, if we look at principle number Roman numerals 8 on page 9, what we'll also be doing, and with a couple of the groups that we are talking with at the moment, there seems to be some opportunity to engage not only with them, their rangatahi in the area, but also with MSD and others, and say, look, how can we get the best out of this, not only using KMR funding, but also other funding. So, and I've also had recent discussions with land care groups, and have suggested that they might also be orienting some of the work which they might want to do in conjunction with this fund, so that if there are, say, for example, owners of land in multiple ownership, which for whatever reason is not able to be commercially productive, they could potentially qualify for this fund. Their landowner contribution could come from a land care group if it involved ongoing work and work which people could be involved in fencing, planting, maintenance, etc. MSD might come to the fore, so there could be quite a significant amount of capital that moves forward on any particular property into the even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's the aim of the overall aim and principles of the fund. There's 4 areas that we can look at that we specifically fund in the middle of page 9 there. One is a contribution towards management and engagement, and that might equate to, say, for this year, say $10,000 a group. And if they could find match funding in terms of time or contribution that they could look at from their management committee, then that could be, we could look at that. The second area is sediment reduction plans, which we are providing free, and either through land management or field advisors, or alternatively, what we've said to a couple of community groups which are up and running at the moment, they might have somebody who's suitably qualified, and we can put them through the training, which was taking place in October and November, so that they can have their own qualified land management advisor, and then that putia comes towards them. Then, of course, the contributions on the same basis of the landowner grant scheme towards the work on the whenua, 50% of contributions up to key costs such as preparation, fencing, planting, and maintenance can be made available. And then, of course, what I mentioned before, there's other sources that our staff can work with these community groups on to try and bring into the work which they are wanting to do. Just for example, we've had some discussions with a group, Tinopai, which has got quite a number of members of the community involved in it. They want to involve their young people. They also have had discussions with Te Arai. They're quite happy to be, they want to start propagating plants and setting up a hard stand area associated with their marae. So Te Arai Nurseries, we'd be keen to link in with them. They want to do quite a lot of voluntary work, but they do want some jobs to come out of it for their rangatahi. So we'd be linking them with MSD and finding out whether or not we can get some support there. They do have, we're not quite certain yet, but large areas of public land, but also quite a number of the landowners in that vicinity have said yes, they're quite keen to be part of this. So we've probably got 30, 40, maybe 50 blocks of land that could become part of this overall scheme. So it's looking very, very, very positive at the moment. So that's just an example of it. What I've suggested, rather than going into too much detail about the rest of it, just to go back to page 8, just the recommendations that the report be received, and that the key principles and criteria for the fund be adopted, and then we can work on it. What I've also mentioned further down in the report is that we want to start working with a number of groups, and then in the light of experience, maybe come back to, on the top of page 11 there, come back to the committee to adjust as, if need be, as we learn and work through with community groups. So happy to answer any questions. I'm sure that Duncan Cavell has been involved in a number of discussions with me, and also, you know, John's got some perspective. So between us, we're happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you, Alan. Any comments from the members? Kia ora, Penny Smart.
Thanks very much, Alan. I appreciate that it's going to evolve as we go along. Sounds good. The only question I've got is just the funding that's going to come from other sources. How does that work for in-kind contributions, and does it have to be 50-50, or what's the sort of criteria around that, or will it just depend on who the funder is?
It's the latter, I think, Penny. It will depend on who the funder is. One of the things which we're quite excited about and is that we've talked with MSD, and where they can see year-round jobs, they're quite happy to develop a specific fund focus for Kaipara Moana remediation. So if we were to create year-round jobs, then they would come up with something that's suitable to support those. By year-round jobs, I mean not just a 6-month contract or a 3-month contract, but something that gives people, you know, involved in planting, involved in, you know, land management, involved in pest control, involved in fencing, etc., so that they've got a year-round job. So that's a positive. The rest of it would just depend on who that funder might be.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have to, like, I'm just thinking the in-kind contribution, it wouldn't necessarily have to be matched, because that would add another complexity, wouldn't it? So,
yeah, no, it doesn't. And for government funding, we probably would not be able to account for that as in-kind contribution, because the Crown's paying for them for both. So, but at the same time, if there are other funds that are available, say, for example, we had Million Metres or Trees That Count involved in some of these projects, as indeed we would be seeking their support for some of these projects, that would certainly count as in-kind contribution.
Okay, thank you.
Kia ora, Virginia.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Alan. Thank you. And this might be a question for Duncan. Who are our current advisors? And I also want to know, can anyone come along and do the training, Duncan? Who have we got? Who are our current ones?
Thank you for your question, Virginia. At the moment, we've only got 2 advisors, and they're related to Te Reo Environs. But as of next month, we will begin the training. We hope to have 2 cohorts of about 15, one in October, one in November. And at the moment, I have been asking around people that I know that are in this industry, but also we've got many expressions of interest from various groups, Hapu, many people who have already been into many of our meetings. So we have created a list at the moment, and we're going to do a bit of an evaluation of that list tomorrow, I believe, Alan, and then we'll set some criteria of what we need what we need initially, and also who we want to promote, and it also aligns strongly with what service those individuals can provide in quantities, and so that we can balance the needs of the project versus the multiple objectives of this project.
So Duncan, on from that. So do they have to have some sort of experience to take this on?
Ideally, a level of experience and a level of knowledge of the landscape, but the course we're designing is we're going to start them all at equal level, and we're going to take them through the process. Ideally, and we know people learn on the job. There's no such thing as a land management degree. So we know that people with great experience, practical experience in the field, have many, many values. And there's also people that have maybe a bit more academic or a bit more conservation experience that won't know anything about fencing. So together, we're going to train them up as a whānau, and hopefully share their experiences and learning on the approach. And with respect to the training, we're going to have national Komator of these areas, Simon Stokes, as well as linkages to the New Zealand Association of Resource Management and myself to help the training, so that these people, once they are part of our qualification, can continue their professional development, have a home to go to professionally, can be mentored, can register their portfolios of work, so that they've got a long vision, and moving. Ideally, these people will move into freshwater farm planning once it's developed by central government, and I'll give them a real huge career opportunities.
Just one more question, Alan. And it's to do with Mātauranga Māori. Okay, so we're looking, the objectives around this whenua whānui fund criteria is about incorporating Mātauranga Māori. I just want to know how far we're along that path, and who's going to be doing this part of it.
Virginia. Yeah, that's been the $100,000 question for the last 6 months. We have had several hui, and Willie will be aware, with different parties to try and progress Mātauranga Māori framework. Because I think, as the chair has often said, it's we don't want something that's too academic, and it is, at the end of the day, kōrero tuku iho, or the discussions more locally, which are going to contribute to the kinds of taonga species, the kinds of things that people want to see actually on the whenua. So it's an important part of it. We have got that now as part of the Environs contract, which is, we'll talk about later on the agenda, now that we've actually virtually, we're just hopefully 1 or 2 meetings away from removing the impediments with respect to legal progression on the health and safety aspects of it. If that's the case, if we can nail that later on this afternoon, which we're hopefully be able to do, we should be able to sign the Environs contract later this week, which will then precipitate funding to enable the Mātauranga Māori strategy to be developed by Environs. And they will coordinate a framework, and then we need to actually start rolling it out on essentially at a marae level by marae level basis around the rohi. And that will then, as criteria come out, both from the overall framework and also from the discussions which will take place at that marae and community level, we'll be able to bring those into the criteria, and not only to this criteria, but also the landowner grant scheme as well.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Alan. Not to cut across anybody else that's got comments, but I wondered, going back to your 3 recommendations, were just for absolute clarity, if the second resolution could actually contain the previous name, so we know which name we're replacing, and it doesn't become an afterthought 6 months down the track. So this Whenua Whānui Fund is the renamed whatever that former title was.
I think we're calling it Hapu and Community Grant Scheme. I think that's what we were calling it.
Yeah. It had another name. But I know further questions. I see Greg Sayers had put a question in the chat about wages and structures, pay levels and whatnot. I think someone can get back to him with that. He also noted that he supports the proposition, and if there are no more comments on it, there are 3 resolutions here.
Kia ora, Chair.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. I do have some concerns, and I do have a concern as a trustee of Ngā Maunga Whakahi on signing the MOU on all landowners, marae, hapu community groups within the catchment. I have a concern over one, accountability, evaluation, and a method of monitoring. And I say that because as a trustee of Ngā Maunga Whakahi, I'm actually mandated as a kai kōrero for the 5 marae of South Kaipara. And the hapu of South Kaipara. And I just need to address my concerns because I know there'd be pretty high expectations. And our Kaipara Uri have had enough disappointments. So I just would like that addressed, Alan, about the accountability and evaluation. The Kaipara Moana advisors, is that where it'll be the first point of call? Then up to the business unit of Māori Kura.
Yeah, kia ora. Cherie, I think what we will be doing is we'll be bringing these applications to the joint committee in the first instance until we have I mean, with the landowner grant scheme, it's not that much different from a lot of the other landowner grant schemes that have been operating either by NRC or by Auckland Council. So there's a significant amount of, if you like, institutional knowledge, experience, which staff have, and that can be handled. 95% of those can be handled by the Māori Kura. But with these areas, this is new. And, you know, as I was mentioning to the chair and deputy chair the other day, that we don't really have a clear idea of exactly what we're doing. We think we know what we're doing, but we have to approach it with a degree of humility and say, look, we are implementing a scheme which we think is going to adjust. So what we'd like to do would be to bring these applications to the joint committee for your sign off. And in terms of monitoring, one of the things which we have, and I'll mention this in the Acting Pautataki's report as well, one of the things that we have got one of the things we're looking at the moment is integrating a KPI and a monitoring framework for all of our activities, and that will come back to the joint committee as well, and that will also include the monitoring of this particular fund and how it's been spent, and keeping an eye on it. So, and of course the evaluation side of it will be brought in on an annual basis as well. So that's how we're approaching it. But certainly we're working with community groups at the moment, but we are going to bring all of these applications back to the joint committee. We don't expect that there's going to be a large amount of them. There's probably about 5 or 6 at the moment that we've got in the pipeline. We understand that Ngā Maunga Whakahi's also got quite a few more that we haven't yet engaged with and keen to do that. But we'd like it all to come back to the joint committee.
Kia ora.
Good, Alan.
Kia ora, through the chair, and this is just following on from Cherie's. So Ngā Maunga Whakahi has been working with, under the continuity of our trust business, with 3 of our proposals. So once it goes through our processes, and that was agreed at the Tahana Hui, so we would then send it up to you.
Kia ora. Yes.
Kia ora?
Yeah. Yep,
good. And then we will work together, and Sandra will come up to the senior officers. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yeah.
So just a rider to what I was saying. Some of the way that the paper has been couched, in that ngā marae e rima, you know, and so I've been approached by 3 marae. 2 marae are interested to do things on their whenua, but they have to go through their processes, and yeah, we'll know that on the 15th November and in February 2022. But the other marae are thinking, oh my goodness, do we have to do something? So it would be good to have a conversation around those, because it depends whether marae are actually putting their hand up to do something. It's not a prerequisite that they must do something.
Kia ora, Jane. Look, we would be, as I mentioned before, and I know that there's been some changes in the kaiwhakahaere within Manga Whakahi, but we would be very keen to, now you've got your new CE with her feet under the table, perhaps, you know, at some stage over the next week or so, let's try and schedule a meeting, and as soon as lockdown's over, let's have a hui and go from there.
Good. We're doing it for next week, so I'll get in touch with you.
Are there any further comments around I hope people are reading the chat questions as well. There's some stuff coming through there. From Malcolm Nicholson and Greg Sayers as well. Okay, if there's no further questions in that, I think the point has been made that it is an evolving mechanism, but I guess the emphasis is really on the land component relative to the remediation effort, and with that trying to keep a connection between the landowner, the community, the marae, the hapu, whatever entity is running in that sort of general lineup. And I take your point, Cherie, there are a number of scenarios that perhaps have left people a little bit high and dry. If you think of the challenges facing Haranui and Otakanini, seem to be on two different sort of wavelengths. And then you have Araparera, marae and the forest, and then you have forest bridge and putai. You start to get a picture of connections that are a little bit disjointed. However, it is there, and thank you, Alan, and the team for progressing it that far. If we can perhaps wrap our discussions up and to see the three parts to the resolution. Someone like to?
Kia ora, Tane. Just Penny here.
Penny.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just wondering, do we need, as Alan has said, that the applications will be coming to the joint committee, does that need to be added to the recommendations, Alan or Tame? Or is it just so people know if they read these minutes what's the process?
I'm happy to have that, although in due course you may not want them to come to the joint committee, but perhaps if you could say, look, that all applications will come to the joint committee for this current financial year, and then we can review that as well. Because again, if we do get experience and it becomes more operational, if you like, but these applications to begin with, I think, are going to be sensitive, so I'm more than comfortable for that recommendation to be added to the recommendations. Yeah.
I'm happy to take your lead here. It's just a thought that occurred to me.
Yeah, I think it'll be useful to put in there that we give it maybe 6 months as we try and progress this, of these proposals coming to the committee. That way we keep tabs on the alignment, because there's a number of issues at play here of us wanting to extend the program beyond the 6 years, which I think is going to need some solid directions around alignment with existing programs. If you look at the direction that MSD are taking, the whole jobs for nature, shovel ready, is going to be, I think, a fair amount of refinement that goes on there. And it would be useful to make sure that we don't, become isolated out on a limb somewhere, simply because our processes are perhaps too rigid. So maybe the insertion of that these proposals under this Whenua Whānui Fund be tabled with the Joint Committee via the Poutāpaki to help us all understand and develop the processes attached to such programs. That's all. I don't see it being a sort of ongoing matter. I think once we understand the process and connect more with the likelihood of groups that will step forward into this community gathering, the Marae Hapu Association again is one that we're not so sure of as yet. We're testing one in the Mamaranui area over the Kaihu Valley Trail. That's a program that's running along the proposal is to take the trail along the stop banks of the Kaihu River. I mean, if we could get that agreement with the landowners, and there's 2 Mardi trusts in there. There's a marae, there's an urupa, 2 land blocks, and one guy with a dairy platform leasing these 2 land blocks. Well, sort of makes sense to keep the cycleway along the stop bank, but it's yet to materialize. It's got to go through as many machinations of getting those landowners or the trustees to agree with it, then line that up with the lessee, then the landowners on either side of those 2 blocks, then the urupa, then the marae, at the end of which people would be 120 years old and got nowhere. But no, I don't mean that. It's just, I think it's one of those evolving matters. So perhaps if we could have it so as we see this evolving over the next 6 months, Alan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think my recommendation, I've just written something, I think that for the current financial year, all applications for funding under the scheme be brought to the Joint Committee for its approval. So if we could add that, then I think that just gives us that period through till this financial year, and then we can pick it up as part of the new budgeting process as to which way you want to go from there.
Okay. I've got a Jane Sherrard is, are you happy to follow that line of thinking, Jane, in moving these 3 resolutions?
Kia ora. I just reiterate what I said at Tahana, that just the context around the paper, does imply that Haukainga whānau trust groups need to go to the marae, because it always says marae and community groups. And so we've got whānau who are thinking, well, can't we do this with our own whenua whānau trust? So if that is firmed up, as we move on, because it's a going concern of what we're doing, I'm happy to move the paper.
Kia ora, Jane, that's definitely the intent. Yeah,
definitely. It just needs to be stronger as we move on.
Yeah.
I move.
I'll second, Penny.
Kia ora. Moved by Jane Sherrard, seconded by Penny Smart. It's resolutions at 5.1. So 1, 2, 3 of those. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 5.2, Helen.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Yes, again, I think there's been some discussion about this, but this is almost, if you like, a complementary paper to the Whenua Whānui Fund, but goes beyond that as well. And that's around the in-kind contribution process, what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. As you're well aware, the Crown has put down $100 million on the table for the first 6 years, and the councils have also said they're going to put $20 million down, and they've had those resolutions through their into their 10-year planning processes. And the rest of it, the other 80 million, we need to find from landowner contributions and also from in-kind contributions. The landowner contributions, we think, will be fairly straightforward because of the landowner grant scheme and also the Whenua Whānui scheme, where there is cash required and what we are prepared to pay for various services, whether they be fencing or preparation of land, purchase of trees. That is almost at a stage where we've finished that particular piece of work. So we will be bringing back a schedule to your workshop in October to have a look at, although we do think it's probably more operational as opposed to something which which the Joint Committee needs to approve, but certainly want you to be across it. So we've virtually got that piece of work, and that will cover, and I note also the email chat or the chat that's going on as well. It will cover what we're prepared to pay for various things such as wages, and of course in-kind contributions stack up on that too. So in other words, you know, if somebody's on a board, they might be, you know, commanding $1,000 or more a day, but we're not going to pay that. What do we pay for the hourly rate? So that's part of the work which is going on behind the scenes. So essentially what we've seen is that there are 4 groups. There's Kaipara entities, there's the community, which also includes industry and association group, and philanthropic groups, and there's also landowners and councils. So what we've had to do is to say, okay, what are we prepared to pay, or how do we fairly address contributions from each of these groups? And the other aspect of it is how do we then collect that information, and how do we then verify that information? So let's address the collection of that information and the verification of that information first. Contributions from landowners will be through the Smarty grant scheme, and what will happen is when they put up their sediment reduction plans, they will, excuse me, sorry about that. When they put up their sediment reduction plans, they will be identifying what their contributions are going to be, how much it's going to cost. So we'll be able to get the landowner contributions through that mechanism. Likewise, the councils are fairly clear. They've got their processes in which they are capturing information on how much their staff put in and what contributions they're making. Excuse me, and that's a fairly clear pathway. So we're quite comfortable with those 2 groups. The other 2 groups around Kaipara and entities, and also the community groups, we need to, is really the key area that is addressed in this paper. So we need to, what we're thinking of doing is setting up a portal, and whereby community groups and Kaipara will be able to post their in-kind contributions consistent with a set of agreed criteria. And with respect to community groups, we'll be talking as we go through the Whenua Whānui Fund discussions and negotiations. We will be talking to them as to what this criteria looks like, what they can account for, and how that is entered into that portal. They may not enter that into the portal. It may be one of the staff members in the Marakura that enters that into the portal, simply because we will come to some agreement with them as to how that money is, or how that in-kind contribution is determined. So we just to be a little bit flexible on that. With respect to Kaipara Uri, we would expect that we will come to an agreement with the post-settlement entity boards, and they will be able to advise us and into those in-kind contributions into the system. So the question then comes on to how do we account for what we need to account for. We need to bear in mind in all of this too that this is whatever decisions that you make today, we need to take to the Ministry for the Environment for their agreement as the other partner and signatory to the MOU. So what we're suggesting is that if we turn to attachment 1, which I think is on page 22, we're suggesting that we've identified there the contributions that can be taken into account, particularly from the Kaipara Uri entities, and then also the community groups. We want to have a degree of flexibility in some areas, but in other areas we want it to be reasonably firm and reasonably clear. I won't go through all of these contributions because you can read it there, but happy to respond to any questions about that. The calculations at the bottom of page 23 will be expanded quite rapidly in the near future with the work which we've had GWE doing, and also the nursery strategy team, which they've now come back, and I had a look last week at the first cut of their costs for things like 3-wire fences and 7-wire fences and fence posts and all of the other bits and pieces. They've made some recommendations on that. We've asked them to go back and do a little bit more work on that. And they're coming back hopefully within the next week or two, so that we should have this all ready for the Joint Committee consideration to workshop in October. Happy to respond to any questions, and I know John and Duncan are more than happy to respond as well. Thank you.
Kia ora, Alan. Thanks for that. It's Willie speaking here. Just for clarity, I'm also coming from page 23, and I'll just use Kaipara Uri as the example here. And if I go 1, 2, 3, about 4 or 5 bullet point down, it states here, hosting hui as requested by KMR. Just expand on that, and in its practical sense, KMR, I would assume, would be both the Māori Kura, Kaipara Māori Kura, or the Joint Committee.
Yeah, Kia ora, absolutely. What we'd want is that, I mean, it may be that Kaipara Uri will be, I'm sure there will be many hui that Kaipara Uri will want to host. But if there are, and that will be at the cost of whoever is calling that hui, but there may be things that we want specifically, and whether it's the Joint Committee or the Māori Kura, and we can say, look, okay, we will take that as an in-kind cost, or we may even actually financially pay for it, and they pay for parts of it. But if we want specific people there, and then that's something that we would say we would be prepared to look at paying for. It's not really a general hui, it might be a very specific hui that we're wanting on a particular scheme or a particular area. For example, I think one of the things which we have looked at is around the, these, is it parakeki that you named it, Tame? These slopes that we're looking at, which are eroding on the harbour edge. Now, there may be some quite serious discussions that we're going to have with groups from Kaipara Uri on that. And those are ones that we might say, look, you can attend those meetings. And maybe not with the community as a whole, but certainly at the management level in which we're talking about exactly who's going to do what type of contracts do we need. Those are the things that we think could well be taken into account for in-kind costs.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alan.
There's a couple of things in the chat here from around pay, FTE costs, and support for paying for positive hui from Councillor Sayers. And yes, the FTE costs will be, that's part of the GWE assessment, so that instead of us saying, well, you know, we want your chief executive to attend and we also want, you know, one of the more junior staff to attend, we're not going to be paying chief executives rates. We're going to say this is the standard FTE cost that we will pay for that in kind. So we don't have to get everybody's calculation of what it is and how much it costs. So we'll have a standard rate as what we're proposing.
Yeah, good point, Alan. And just wondered around, there's a little bit of the question that Jane raised with the last item, and it concerns the groupings in the community. So, you know, some places inside the Kaipara catchment, the marae is the focus. It's the recreation centre, the drop-in centre, this, that, and the other thing. And I think
Spiritual centre.
we don't sort of, you know, I think we need some flexibility around if the community chooses to use that facility as their centre for their community, that's their choice. We don't stipulate that we only recognise trustees appointed by the Mardi Land Court. Some of these places may be not registered with the Land Court, but they have a incorporated body structured around them. I can think of one right here in Mangakahi that's like that. And just for the record, it was New Zealand's first community-based entity. Land, buildings, everything donated by the community, and been running since 1953. It's run a little bit better than some of the marae I know. So I think that shaping of what constitutes the voluntary contribution inside the community comes by negotiation. So if the community are suggesting the knitting club, the crochet club, the bird watchers society, the fish and game group, they make up the community. That's it. We don't run the argument to say, oh, you have to be registered with the Mardi Land Court or paid up member of the Institute of Directors. No. If they're interested in remediation, irrespective of what their form of constitution and incorporation is, I don't think that's the business of the remediation group, other than getting some clarity on how their volunteers align to a particular program. So I think the same way as you're rating full-time employees, Ellen, to get a rate on that, I think you should also focus on workday equivalence. So if workday is regarded as 8 hours or 6 hours, and you've got volunteers that come together, if they spend, you know, half an hour morning tea, afternoon tea, half an hour for lunch, and they put in 6 hours worth of work, then the effort to put that lunch and morning tea on should be counted as part of the 8 hours, in my opinion. But that's again lining it up with workday equivalence. So you can't tell me that we will only view the actual workday as to the spade going into the ground for full 8 hours. Now, like us today, we're going to have a lunch break. So that volunteer workforce will have a lunch break as well. And in my opinion, that's counted. Well, that's how they do it in Mangakahi anyway. The other thing that I wanted to make a point around was some of the partnerships. Again, if a community finds its partnership with a group that may not be common across the catchment, then I think that's that group's prerogative. It's not for us to stipulate or to prescribe that we will only recognize partnerships. So if you've got a community that doesn't have any dairy farmers in it, and they've gone off and formed an association with the, I don't know, the Merino Wool Gatherers Association, so be it. You know, we don't have to trim them up to all look like Fonterra Richie McCaw fan club members. And then again, the events, initiatives that these communities put together to keep their legend, to keep their story going. Because that's the continuity of that kōrero tuku iho. And some of them may have, we've got people running around the north here now in the name of creating visions for our communities. And it's surprising that people are recognizing the value in the identity markers adopted by these communities. So places like Maunga, Awa, places of significance. The significance isn't defined by someone in Wellington, it's defined by the locality where it occurs. So the sense of kōrero tuku iho keeps it place-based, not an exercise to compare it with a set of criteria developed outside of that area. So yeah, those comments come to mind, and I think the paper's heading in the right direction. Kia ora. Kia ora, Virginia. Kia ora, Virginia.
Yeah, kia ora, Tami. Did you have something to say first, John?
Yes, I just thought I'd respond to kia ora. Tame, that's very much the intention. This is not an exercise in trying to create a who's in, who's out categorization around community groups, because we all know that, in fact, any type of group who's keen to get mobilized and support the take and take on remediation projects. So I think that's a common theme here, but just reiterating effectively what Alan said, we need flexibility here. The second point that I think is very important is the work that Alan's referring to by GWE and our nursery team is giving us a very good idea of what the market cost of an outcome is, i.e. how much it costs to put a fence in on average, how much a planting project would cost per hectare and a certain stems per square metre, so forth and so on. And we're able to take those costs and then work with a community group with that as our baseline and say, for example, your project here is a $10,000 project according to our calculations of if we got contractors in, and we would be able to, we would get this outcome for $10,000, including the labour and including, say, the plants in a planting day, and including, say, some spraying, and including the organisation and logistics that's required around that. So that's our baseline. And then if a community group turns around and says, well, look, we're keen as mustard, we can mobilise 20 people over a weekend to do a whole lot of this work and make it happen. And we'll bring our people. We wouldn't mind a bit of help with the cost of lunch and, some stuff like that. And we can work that out, but it goes back to these market assessed base costs for achieving that outcome. And that's where you get the consistency across the program, which I think is really, really important. And it also means that, what we understand is with many of these groups, if a external funder says we can cover the cost of your plants, which is often half of the cost of a project is actually the material costs, then that's a great boon to these groups. It's a real motivator and a real lift up. So anyway, I just thought I'd make that comment because it's that ability across the life of the program, of the KMR program, to be able to show a rational and consistent approach to achieving these remediation outcomes, and then making sure that the goodwill and the labour and the effort and the everything else that community groups in all of their sizes and natures bring to projects, that is properly accounted for. So it's actually a very good way, we think of acknowledging their mihi and respecting what they're able to do. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tami, through you, Mr. Chair. In just regards to the suggested qualifying contributions in attachment 1, Ellen, and this is to do with the unacceptable section, like attending public meetings. Now, I just want to speak on behalf of our kaumātua and queer who have been attending our meetings, in-kind contributions, because a lot of them have been coming to our meetings ever since we started with the MOU. I would, that they were under the impression they come to support our hui, learn about the hui, be there to support, understand, and perhaps, feed out to our wider whānau. So I'd like to think that they are going to be considered, those that attend, some sort of in-kind contribution of them attending those meetings. Otherwise, they won't come. It's just, I want to see that the in-kind contributions are equitable. So when we come to our probably recommendations, and if we look at number 4, that the KMR consults representatives of contributor groups to ensure the in-kind contribution process is effective, I'd like to see these two, this other word added to it, and equitable. Okay, across the two groups. Like I can see how, you're talking about the council's contributions, the KMR, Udi, our contributions are going to be assessed, looked at by an advisor or what have you. I mean, we can see what the councils are, but I want to make sure that our people are being treated fairly as well. So I'd like to see that word equitable added after effective, is effective and equitable. Kia ora. That's my recommendation to add to that. Discussion, reactions.
Tōko.
Kia ora, Virginia. Look, very comfortable with that addition, and that's something we need to, to work through. That kaumātua queer in support of and identified by, quite clearly in support of, the Kaipara Uri, it does need to be looked at and also recognised. How far we go in that space, that's a question mark. Because sometimes you will get, large numbers of the community itself turning up for various reasons. That's the question, and hence the reason why we sort of identified sort of public meetings. Now there may well be, say for example, we had a public meeting and we've requested support from the Uri representatives to present at that public meeting, then I would have thought that would be an in-kind contribution that is very much acceptable. But for, say, members of the public as a whole to come and express their interest, that's something which I would imagine would be very difficult to actually calculate, and in addition to that, difficult to identify the benefit from. And I would imagine that that probably wouldn't qualify. So it's really just finding where that line is, and that's why very, very keen to, you know, to have those conversations with everybody basically, and so we can actually come up with something which is fair and reasonable. So quite happy to have that addition equitable, yeah, and to work through that conversation. Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, through you, Alan. So, Willie here. So the 29th of July, Hui at Tau Marama, Tihana, would not be seen as a direct benefit for the Kaipara Moana remediation.
Well, I think I wouldn't use those terms. I mean, it's definitely of benefit for the Kaipara Moana remediation, but does it actually, I mean, the money that we are getting for is really focused on what's happening on the whenua, you know, it's for trees and for plants and for, you know, the management of that, et cetera, and at a general level, yes, it raises consciousness, it certainly does assist, it builds a community spirit, it builds this level of support, all of those things do that, but it's also, you know, there are also benefits for the community as well, independent of the remediation. But the way in which the Crown's focused its money has been very much on essentially what's going to take place on the whenua. Although, you know, the point which the chair made earlier, there's a whole lot of things that go into that. And so I think we also want to just focus as much as possible onto, you know, what's happening on the whenua and what's critical for its management, if you like, or planning for what's taking place there. So that's and that's the issue. How far do we go? If we added all of the time for everybody that attended on the 29th of July, it could run very, very quickly into millions of dollars, and not one tree might be planted. So that's the problem. We need to distinguish somewhere and draw the colour line somewhere.
Yeah, kia ora, Alan. Kate Pai.
Kia ora, Alan. Cherie speaking. I would also support the equity lens be placed over this. Hosting hui for KMR is a big kaupapa when it comes to, for, like we're saying, our marae, they're open hui. And as you know, we don't have closed hui. And so we can have people turning up from all sorts. I just think we need to have a really good look at, a closer look at this from the Kaipara Uri entities. Possibly we need to take this back to our entity to actually agree with it. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Cherie. Definitely, we've circulated it to the chair, the chief executives. The paper has gone to them, and we were supposed to have a meeting on Friday, but it was a bit difficult because of a whole range of reasons. Was that meeting didn't come off. But what I'm keen to do is have very direct consultation, specific hui, with the chief executives and whoever they might identify as appropriate from the Kaipara Uri around this. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we need to get, you know, kanohi ki te kanohi and have those discussions. Yeah.
Yeah, would appreciate that, Alan, because right now we have 5 trustees up for elections.
Kia ora.
So, kia ora.
Kia ora, Malcolm Welsh.
Oh yeah, kia ora. Just a question on the recognising the value of financial value of in-kind contributions. Do we already have those values of how to recognise those? Because have we already reported on in-kind?
Briefly, no. It's this GWE work which John was referring to and I referred to a bit earlier on. And we've got spreadsheets actually of those values at the moment. And we've had the first cut of them, but it's not yet quite as comprehensive as we wanted to be. And we also needed to identify the difference between, for example, fencing costs in Auckland were quite a bit different than they are in the northern part of the catchment. So we're wanting to do a little bit of sort of locational sensitivity analysis of those as well. And then we'll come back with these spreadsheets. So they will be tabled and you will see these.
Well, what about just winding it I'm more thinking around so the senior officers group, so that CEO level, and so have we already got numbers that we can apply to that? Because have we not recorded in kind from council?
No, we don't have numbers yet from them. But this is what this paper and the consultation is about, is to identify exactly that. The councils, yes, we do have those numbers and they have their calculation basis, but the senior officers group was asked to come back to us with perspectives on that, and they were quite comfortable for us to produce this paper first, and then they will respond to that, and we expect to get quite specific numbers. They certainly, for the senior officers group, we've been recording time. We know what that attendance looks like, and we will come up with a very clear pathway for that.
Yep. So the two different, I guess, councils' approach and method to capturing that, and the one we're going to put in place, they'll be aligned or reflective of each other, and they'll ideally they probably should be on the same page.
Yep,
so
absolutely. Yep. And what we've talked about is we want at the end of the day, we want an electronic integrated one-page area. So it takes stuff from Mardi grants, that's the landowner contribution. It will take place, there will be a portal which we will agree on with, that'll come through from the Kaipara. Councils will report in that same portal, and the other in-kind contributions will come through that. So at the end of the day, we'll be able to have, hopefully in real time, but it may be we need to do it on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, but hopefully in real time, we'll definitely need to have to capture it on an annual basis, and we'll also need to have an audit trail for that as well. But we will, at the end of the day, we will have one integrated source that collects that.
Right.
Kia ora, Malcolm. Kia ora, Amy.
Kia ora, Tame. Thank you, Alan. I just had a question. I first want to just total the conversation from Virginia, and then also from Malcolm, just to get things really equitable and really good clarity as to how things line up. And just along those lines, I just wondered if you could flesh out for me a little bit the on page 20, there are a couple of paragraphs relating to how governance will be treated in this in-kind contribution and the way it's considered. I guess I just had a question around, particularly for our Kaipara early members on this governance board. They also have, as I understand it, they have quite an important leadership role, communications, engagement role through into their hapu and marae. And so I'm just wondering how we might deal with an individual who sits in one place in one moment, but then moves into another role, which is absolutely of value. Can they be accounted for in this system?
Two things. The contribution which they're making, we would take that contribution, exactly what the our attendance policy is around that. So that's quite clear. That goes straight away into it. As far as your second dimension of that question is concerned, I don't know. I think we need to have this korero around that to be able to say how far do we go down that pathway. I would imagine that a lot of the say the linkages back, the feedback, which uri representatives have to do to marae, the accountability things probably would be not just on KMR, but it may be on other things too. So I think I'm really keen to have that discussion over the next 2 or 3 weeks to see how we actually land that, because that won't be accounted for within our payment schedule, but it definitely makes an in-kind contribution. So I'm very keen to find out and for us to come back with something that is equitable.
Cool, thank you.
Kia ora, Alan. Follow on from that point. In the middle of page 20, there's a section in there that talks about consultation. And if you read that, I think it reflects both the points around the equity question I mean, someone could be 70 years old, be a regarded kaumātua on the marae, and own the biggest farm in the valley. So are they a landowner, are they a kaumātua, or are they a marae rep? I say they're the whole three. And so I think the statement there talks about relevance of the person's contribution to the proposal. So if you're going to engage kaumātua, make sure that you've covered their landowner status in the proposal. They're not there because they are kaumātua alone. They could be landowner kaumātua. They could be kaikorero kaumātua landowner. And so you get a succession of contributions. And, you know, I think the Ministry for the Environment would be really quite keen. I like the sequence that talks of how this is all organised, how it's managed, and then how it's delivered. I don't know about executed, because that talks to me of being terminal. But if it's delivered, fine. And so I think our pitch I just don't want us to get tied up in terms like equity, and we start regarding kaumātua as being a equitable commodity. I mean, the fact that they've reached their age and still own land and still hold their own on the marae, I think puts them in many categories, not just one. So our attempts here, I believe, are to try and quantify with precision and the highest degree of accuracy that we can what that contribution is. So if a person's being engaged for their, I don't know, long association or historical association, or with a land area, with the river system, with the Moana, then that surely will be spelt out through the proposal. And we're not scrambling around trying to put people into various compartments or identify them or define them as such. So I think that section in the middle of page 20 on consultation and engagement is pretty strong in giving us a lead on where it goes, and I think it's heading in the right direction. Anyway, my thoughts. Kia ora.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there's no more questions. Oh, sorry. I'm happy to move those recommendations.
Before you move the recommendations, I'd still like the word equitable to be added to number 4.
Kia ora.
Effective and equitable. It doesn't matter whether that's over landowners or whatever, but both sides of both sides of the coin, so to speak.
Kia ora, Virginia.
Is Tommy going to take an early cup of tea?
I was trying to find the
Page 17.
trying to find the recommendations and make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, page 17, tummy up the top.
Yeah.
And I'm just talking about number 4, not the others.
So, Willie, are you happy with recommendations under item 5.2, numbers 1 through to 6, with the addition of equitable to number 4?
Yeah, kapai, Tommy. Kapai.
Okay, so moved by William Wright. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Virginia. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Anyone against?
Kia ora.
That's carried. And moving now to item 5.3.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. This one's got my name on it.
Thank you, John Hutton.
We might get through this agenda by lunchtime. So.
Yes, I think so, John. We'll be watching your length of discussion here.
Kaupai. Forgive me if I'm looking off to the side. I've got multiple monitors. Kia ora koutou anō. So this report is providing a draft annual report. The resolutions are asking the Joint Committee to approve in principle only, with then a delegation to the Chair and the Deputy Chair to agree a final version. Now, I just thought I should make it clear, we're doing it this way primarily because of timing. The report is due at the end of October. Alongside it will be an audit report, which is underway right now. We have Deloitte's doing that for us. And because there's no Joint Committee formal meeting in October, we're asking or recommending to you that you have the delegation to the Chair and the Deputy Chair in this regard. What we'll be doing is we'll bring the penultimate draft of the annual report to you as a Joint Committee for the workshop on the 18th of October. The version that you've got attached here or provided and being tabled today doesn't have any of the nice formatting or illustrations or anything like that. It is very much text only. So we'd have a version that's got all of that in it with you. It also provides us an opportunity to make any corrections and respond to matters that might be raised in the audit. And also, of course, respond to any matters that you might wish to raise today. I should note with a slight blush of embarrassment that on Friday afternoon, having sent this out, we discovered a double count, and it's due to trying to work between both Auckland Council and Financial Systems and then having them report up to Northland Regional Council. We'd done a manual entry on one item and then it had come across through SAP. I won't bore you with the details, but the effect is that we need to go down 140,000 in terms of the management administration costs. So the overall cost there is reduced by that amount, and that would take the overall expenditure up to 30th of June to 1.898, so 1,898,000. But we'll be amending that in due course, and we'll actually provide those slight amendments on the version that goes with the minutes today, with your blessing. So look, about the report itself, hopefully it's self-explanatory. We're trying to hit that Goldilocks spot between being too long and being too short, and also we're looking to have what we'd call modest production values for the report, given this is really the first 9 months of the program. The theme, or at least the title of the report, is Preparation for Remediation, which really has been the focus of this 9 months. We've tried to strike a balance between developing the capacity and systems needed for the KMR, but also get those early remediation wins on the ground. And in this way, I should note that the original business case provided to ministers always had a year zero for the program to allow us to build up the systems and processes. But with the COVID crisis and with the way the money has come across and the pressure to create employment, to get things moving as quickly as we can, we took the approach of trying to do both of those things. We're doing both of those things. I'm very happy to answer questions and respond to anything you might wish to raise. One thing I would note, that it's an interesting thing in tracking the numbers to 30 June, is that the actual outputs or the costs of remediation, as in the money for completed fencing that is has been paid to the landowners, doesn't give a good indication of actually how much progress has been made on that area. So what's important to draw your attention to is the remediation works key achievements table on page 8. So for example, at 30 June, 11.6 kilometres, 63 kilometres of fencing was actually paid for. So these are completed projects that have been finalised, been vetted, and the money's in the bank account of the landowner. Yet there's an additional 82 kilometres that's all been contracted, that's underway. So what this is reflecting, I think, is going to be an ongoing challenge for the KMR program, in that most of these remediation projects are effectively 18-month projects. Once you've engaged with the landowner, entered into an agreement, got the process underway, you then are subject to the calendar year, the seasonal year, where you're only doing the fencing when it's dry predominantly, and you're only doing the planting when it's wet, so forth and so on. And that makes it pretty tricky to track these things. Well, not hard to track, but it just means that a lot of these projects will go across financial years. In time, I think we're going to, or at least we're designing the Smarty Grants system in a way that we're going to be able to count both when projects are completed and the money's gone out the door, that's the really obvious one, but also when money and projects are committed to. And so we'll have some phasing of timing in between there. So in time, our ability to track both what we've committed to and work that's underway and the actual sign off, I think will be a lot better. But just that, I think that was one of the interesting things that really stood out for us when we're doing this work. Otherwise, I'll very happy to answer some questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora, John. Willie here. Page 9, and this is probably just probably a point of question actually. Page 9, under landowner grant scheme, bottom paragraph, we always keep talking about Fonterra. Nothing wrong with that, but there are other agricultural sectors, e.g. beef and lamb and that. Would it not be appropriate to mention where we are with that at the moment with other agricultural sectors?
Possibly not, because the difference is that we've got very specific decisions and a piece of work directly with Fonterra. Fonterra is the only one of the agricultural sector that has the infrastructure in place in terms of their sustainable dairy advisors who can pick up this kind of work. The other sector organisations don't necessarily have that. Now, that doesn't mean we're not in conversations with them or they're not, an important part of the mix here. But in terms of the work program, this is a specific thing we've committed to.
Okay, cool.
Malcolm has his hand up.
Oh, kia ora, John. Just relating back to the annual report requirements, and the last two items there, or one's prior to provide an update on health and safety, and I'm just wondering whether there should be a line item in that report around health and safety, and even if it's a one-liner. And probably on the other one is address any issues raised. And I'm thinking here more from JMC and our risk register and where we're at with that, because we had some pretty hefty risks in there. And realise we're still developing that, but how that relates to the reporting perhaps needs a bit of attention, and maybe the attention is us actually, running that risk register and that mitigation approach, running that out, because I think pretty sure we're still in draft. But how does that relate back to our reporting?
Kia ora, Malcolm. Look, you're absolutely right on the health and safety. We will need to introduce something there, and thank you for that. Sharp eyes. On the other matters, I think it's in response to concerns and issues raised directly by MFE or in conversations with MFE. So that I'm not too sure if we need to cover off that in quite that way, but it'd be a judgment call as to whether we use the annual report as a place to kind of reflect on risks. I think that could be a useful addition, but I'd want to talk. I'd want to sort of get a steer also from Alan and others as to quite how we do this. There are, with this program, there are significant risks, obviously, and we're in the middle of one right now with COVID lockdowns that have genuinely slowed some of the things that are underway, which is a worry. But
I think if I just might have a quick comment, we really didn't start, really apart from one workshop probably in April, where we did identify, had a bit of a session on that, but we really haven't started our risk work until this financial year. So it's really been July, August that we've had these sessions at Tahana around that. So hence the reason why I felt that we're probably a little light on what we can include in last year's annual report. So hence the reason why nothing there. If the Joint Committee is comfortable with that, then I think we'll leave it at that. But if you do want almost a postscript that we could add in saying that work is underway, and we could almost just give a summary of risks, but it is not from last year. It's basically it's it's not a postscript. It's a prospect, if you like, or something that foreshadows where we're going for compliance. We could do that, but at the same time, it's really not work that was done in this financial year.
Kia ora. Kia ora, through the chair, just follow on to that. It could actually be subsequent work, because a little concern that, and I agree with Malcolm, a little concern is that we're talking about the risk, and we were aware of the risk beforehand and risk now. Under a subsequent to the annual plan, you could be saying that we are now currently working on it, given the post given the COVID environment. So something like that to clearly show, it is on our radar, and it was a planned move to be on our radar. Kia ora.
Perhaps it's a matter that we could take up with the auditors as well, and just see what their comment would be, whether we add something on, because we could add an extra appendix. But at the same time, if the auditors are saying, well, actually, did you do this in this financial year? So maybe we could have that discussion. So let's have that discussion with MFE and with the auditors and just see where we go. Because, you have done over the last 2 meetings a considerable amount of work on it. But beforehand, it was really just a few line items in some of our strategic sessions.
Risk management, it's just good governance. The number, it's the number one. Well, one of the key good governance.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Amy.
Kia ora, Tame. Thanks, John. I think it looks really good. I just had a couple of questions. My first one was understand that this is a document to go to MFE, but how? I thought it was a really good summary and quite a good piece of work that kind of really encapsulates where we've got to and the challenges we've been working through. How widely do you think that this will be disseminated beyond MFE?
Well, I'd imagine for a start we'd have it on our website as one of the documents that are there, and we'd hopefully have be part of a bundle of things there. It's a product of the obligations that we have under the deed of funding, but really it's also an external facing document to our communities and, and everybody who's interested. MFE, I should say, they also receive more detailed ongoing information from us. So, this is not the final word in all of the kind of reporting and relationships we have with MFE. So look, I think it is a document that can be more widely circulated, and it should be designed like that. I think the work that we'll be able to do, bringing the KMR brand and imagery into it, is going to be really important, because it'll be our first significant public-facing document with that branding in place. And I should say that Level have done some templating work already, but we'll have that all looking good for the next iteration.
Cool, thank you. I really support that. I think there would be real value in this being something that we extend out quite far. And based on that, the only other comment I had, and it's just really a bit of a question in my mind, and happy for you to decide what's most appropriate, but just on page 9, under the focus areas, there's a heading there, engagement and communication. And I just wonder if it's worth up front maybe having a short sentence which kind of indicates that we know that this has been an area that we have really struggled with in this year 0, year 1 atmosphere. It has been really hard to engage and communicate. For all of us, repeatedly, that's been a conversation point. So I think if this is going out to our people, I think it's probably good to acknowledge that we know that has actually been a bit lacking, and it's been a timing thing and a phasing thing. But yeah, I think it's worth just acknowledging that, because that's probably number one frustration for people out there. But otherwise, I think it's a really good looking report, and yeah, I really look forward to seeing it when it's done up with the branding and stuff. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just make a quick comment to Mr. Chair in response to Amy. We're thinking, as John said, we'll obviously get it done with the appropriate production values and in soft copy on the website. But we were thinking of perhaps getting 150 to 200 hard copies as well, so that all of you would have them, plus your key constituents and what have you. We didn't feel that a big, huge production run is appropriate at this stage, but there will be some people that a hard copy would be important to have, and so our key stakeholders, and also some others. So that's what we were thinking of in terms of the hard copy production run. But that won't happen, of course, until you've had a look at it all in October, and then the chair and deputy chair have finally approved it, if you accept that recommendation.
Yeah. Any further comments? Let's go along with the points that Malcolm made around management of risk, and also the component of mitigation. John, we've put a lot of these cards on the table without necessarily knowing how and which way it was going to play out. Two things. I think the drivers for managing risk do come from the Joint Committee, not a prescription or a order from Deloitte or the Ministry for the Environment. The people we have around this Joint Committee are really quite clear on the kind of risks that we've been tossing up, and we've tried to work through that. The other thing is maybe our respective signatories to the MOU and DETA funding also get a copy at the same time as the Ministry for the Environment gets their final copy. So there's not sort of any discovery off the front page of the Herald or something. Or breakfast TV or something like that. Anyway, if there's no further questions or comments, seen the recommendations. Do we have a mover?
Kia ora. Happy to second.
So that was moved by, was that Amy, was it?
Yeah, kia ora.
Moved by Amy, seconded by Jane.
Kia ora.
For recommendations at 5.3. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Any abstentions? Just remind Sandra to keep an eye on the chat.
Yep,
Link.
no, I've got that. Thank you.
There's some abstentions that were, some votes that were recorded in there as well. Okay, so that's carried. And I just wondered, Ellen, about that. I sent an email and look, apologies, I only got it out of the spam section in my email this morning. But it's an email from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and they've selected the Wairoa catchment for a case study that they're wanting to initiate. And it looks, there's a lot of detail there, but I put it up and wondered if we could get some kind of follow-up. I know I had a cup of tea and a conversation with Simon Upton and his team, and he did talk about what he was wanting to do in taking two case studies, Matoda River in the south and the Wairoa catchment in the north here. And of course, it's come through as a investigation proposal that they're wanting to work through, and I think there could be some alignment with what the Kaipara Moana remediation program is seeking, and I guess some kind of contact with that office to get an understanding of how the two programs could be aligned. That was all. I haven't responded to that email, and I passed it over to Ellen at about 8:30 this morning.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Yeah, absolutely. No, I was on another meeting, so I haven't had the chance to get back to you and absorb it, but I have had a quick read of it, and I think it's absolutely aligned with the kind of mahi that we're doing. So I think why would we not want to work very closely with the Commissioner for the Environment and others to identify what needs to be done. It does look to me as though there's a degree of sort of overlap with some of the things that we are doing. It's a cursory observation from the request for proposal that's gone through GETS. So I think we can just have a discussion and see what we can work through, and we would want to cooperate as much as possible with what they want to do, and I'm sure that they wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel as well. So we could share information, and if they've got anything that they might do that actually adds value and pushes the project a little bit more in terms of our direction, we'll be more than happy to receive that kind of input. So I think it's a matter of us just contacting, and I will keep everybody informed as to how that might move.
Very good. Well, thank you, Alan. Any other matters with general business, or there's a message from Duncan Covell in the chat.
Yes.
Oh, good.
If Duncan could circulate that attachment, I
Yeah,
think that'd be
that'd
great.
be great.
Yep, thank you.
There's no other general business. Our next meeting is
Mr. Chair, there's the acting Taki's report.
Oh, there?
5.4.
Yep. 5.4.
Okay, 5.4. My agenda ran out of steam at page 27.
Printer remembered ink, huh?
So it is. 5.4. Kia ora, Alan. We'll pass it back to you.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. So just sort of have these reports just to bring people up to speed with other things which are happening that don't necessarily need a joint committee decision on, but at the same time, I think you'd be keen to find out bits and pieces. So the first one there is staff appointments. We've had, well, I couldn't tell you how many interviews, but it must be 2 or 3 dozen interviews of different people for different roles in the Marikura, because there are 16 staff positions, as you know. At the top level of the leadership team members, we've had discussions on the catchment remediation manager and made a verbal offer, which has been verbally accepted. We're just to go through the process there. The communications lead at the same, mana whenua relations lead the same. And so we've got, and we've had also John Hutton seconded to the end of the year as the strategic business lead, but we've got a potential replacement for him who has also verbally accepted an offer. So we have to make those offers now in writing, and there may be some discussion around that, but I'm optimistic that what we've discussed will take place in terms of signatures, etc. So we're well advanced in those appointments. We've also got some very, very good staff. In fact, we're going to have to make a couple of hard choices in the next day or two on some of the other positions. We've got very good candidates for the business analyst, for the grants processor, got a couple of very good people for the workforce growth and innovation advisors, and also for hapu and community advisors as well. So we have some very good positions there. We have been appointing on the basis and will be appointing on the basis of competence. Part of that competence, of course, is the capacity to engage with mana whenua and Kaipara Uri, and independent of background. I think we would have come to similar agreements, and we've got quite a number of people with mana whenua who we will be appointing to these positions. So very, very happy that that's the case. Very competent, good caliber staff, and I'm sure you will meet them all in due course. I was hopeful that I would be able to put the names and share the names right now, but I'm not quite at that stage. So that just will need to go through that final steps. But I'm very, very happy that we've got some very, very good bicultural, bilingual staff. Not everybody, but at the same time, a significant presence in the Marikura will be very, very good at engaging with the community as a whole. So that's where we're at with that one. We think most appointments will be taking up their roles in late October, early November. There will be a little bit of overlap with some of us who are moving on, and that will be good, I think, as well. So staff appointments, perhaps we can move on to, I'll just perhaps go through everything and then be open for questions. Communications with landowners. So over 300 people have registered their interest for the landowner grant scheme. And we've actually got a draft letter, but what we want to do is to send that letter acknowledging their interest and telling them where we are in terms of the fact that a land management advisor will contact them and assist them with a sediment reduction plan independent of cost. But what we're also doing is using this opportunity to invite them to comment on the actual criteria of that scheme. As you recall, when you approved that, we did say that we would want to have further consultation with landowners themselves. So we're inviting them to one of 3 hui, which we've identified those dates, but we're just finalising the venues at the moment. Otherwise, we would have had the letter out. But when we have identified those venues, we will circulate the draft letter to you all before it goes out to the landowners, so that you're not blindsided by telephone call saying, well, what's this? So we'll be doing that in the next, hopefully 2 or 3 days. We've just got to finalise those venues. So that's in process. As I mentioned earlier on, the health and safety dimensions of the contracts for Fonterra and Environs were the key things that we needed to work through. We've had legal advice last week on that. We just need to square that off with our council partners and just make sure that we're all happy and we're all singing off the same song sheets. So we've got a meeting late this afternoon to address that, and hopefully we will have resolved those issues, and then we can finalise these contracts, and optimistically by the end of this week we'll have some signatures. So that will then precipitate funding to both of those parties to get moving. Workforce development, as I mentioned before, very, very positive response from Ministry of Social Development. We've got a further meeting with them on Thursday to progress a potential scheme that may be suited and tailored just to KMR. What we've also discussed with them, and we've had representatives from Te Reo and Ngā Manga Whakahi join us in these hui. And MSD has been working quite constructively, particularly with Ngā Manga Whakahi, and doing everything that we were quite keen for this sort of employment hub to do. So we're just, rather than create a separate entity, we're just going to piggyback on those arrangements and work through the coordination that's already taking place. So it's looking very positive. We have yet to resolve or to take that conversation a little bit further with Te Reo, and we'd also like to extend that to Te Roro, but it's looking quite positive. The Dargaville end of things, we just need to reflect a little bit more on how we engage with that community. But apart from that, I think we've got some very good progress there. Branding. The subcommittee has done its wonderful work, and one of the members of the subcommittee might want to talk a little bit about that. I think I circulated, hopefully it was circulated to you, all of the some attachments of how we're using that branding. And I don't know, I think within the discussion that we've had at a staff level, we're quite thrilled with what's come out of the work that the subcommittee's done with Level. We just think it's quite amazing, actually. The symbology, the brand values, the colour, the energy of it, the vibrancy is something that's very, very special. Moving on then on to page 2, supplier accreditation. Nursery team have developed an accreditation process. We're working that out for all suppliers. What we intend to do is over the next 3 to 4 weeks, perhaps, accredit all of the suppliers that will be involved in KMR. We'll have, as I mentioned before, we'll have the prices that we're prepared to pay for the kind of work. We'll have processes, we'll have the health and safety, we'll have guidelines with respect to planting, we'll have quality guidelines with respect to fencing, all sorts of things. So we will have actually a contractor's quality guideline. All of this will be rolled into one quality contractor's guideline, so people will know the standards that that we expect with KMR. So we've been working through that, quite a number of hui. It's not been without some difficulties, but at the same time we're virtually there yet, and right at the moment one of our people is just pulling all of that work into one overall document, which we will circulate to you in due course as well. Duncan spoke earlier about the land management, the training of land management advisors. There's some 30 odd people that we've identified who are keen to do that, and they are from different areas as well. So there are a number of those who represent various UDI interests. So we will be getting a balanced group in each of these sessions. I think this Duncan sort of indicated that perhaps didn't come across as clearly as it could have, is that we're linking the course to the New Zealand Association of Resource Management. As he mentioned, some of their kaumātua as well as some of their professionals are going to be involved in this delivery. But what it also does is provide a professional body, if you like, that accredited land management advisors can become part of. So it helps develop a network, it helps develop a level of understanding and support. Digital tools rollout. We have had one meeting with the KMR and the 2 council representatives about that, where digital tools are. We know about the Mardi grant scheme, we know about the stuff that's been done by Media Suite, but there's also this overall freshwater management tool, this overall modelling tool. So that will be the subject of a full workshop in October. So Tom Stevens and others will come and present. And what we would like to do would be to establish a reference group. And so we're in the process of developing a terms of reference, and we will invite Kaipara Uri to nominate representatives as well, so that it is truly a representative body of the partners of KMR. So that's where we've got to there. And then the benefits of that will flow because of access to GIS, access to information, all sorts of things will flow to all of the partners as a result of that. Dedication of the Māori Kura, we're looking at a date now for the 4th of November. We think that most staff will be definitely appointed by then, if not there. So if you're able to identify that in your diaries, and please let me know if there's any concern with that. But we're looking at an early morning dedication ceremony, followed by breakfast, and then there will be some staff engagement with members of the Joint Committee and some key stakeholders. So really looking forward to that. We have what we're calling a Moana field trip. In actual fact, it's a visit to different parts of the Moana, and many of us haven't been out on the Moana at all. Some of you, of course, have lived and breathed it and swum in it and fished in it, and it is you. But others of us, it isn't. So to get a degree of consistent exposure, we felt that we could potentially hire the same vehicle that was hired for the minister's trip earlier on, and Joint Committee members and staff from Māori Kura could go out and actually visit different parts of the Moana, which have got some value. And we can also use it as a celebration for the efforts for the year end. That's not its primary purpose. So we don't want that put on the front page of any newspaper. It is a genuine field trip that we need to do at some stage. So we thought, why not? And then lastly, I'll circulate to you, I'll get Sandra to, or have circulated, I think, to you some dates for diary commitments. So if you could have a look at that, and then at the October meeting, we will review those dates, and then so we can then confirm those for next year's at the November meeting. But we circulated them now because we know you're very busy. You've got a whole bunch of council dates, I think, in front of you as well. So we need to align those, and so we can have those discussions in October. And lastly, a little bit of mea culpa or aroha mai. We haven't got to you the variance analysis report that we'd hoped. We've had some challenges in terms of getting some of the in-kind contributions figures tidied up between Auckland Council and Northland Council. However, I do have visibility across costs, and I don't think we're in any areas where we're exposed, but we will bring to you a full variance analysis report. In fact, I'll circulate that as soon as we're comfortable that we've got the right figures for you to have a look at. So that's where we are with respect to the finances. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the overview. I'm happy to take any questions or receive any comments or directions.
Kia ora, everybody. Who's got their hand up? Malcolm Welsh.
I'll let Penny go. She had her hand up before me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your Benny.
It doesn't matter. Thanks, Malcolm. Quick off the mark. Just not related to what's in here, but just an update from you, Ellen, on the website. I went on there yesterday and it's not up and running yet. Is there an ETA? And the other thing I noticed that was on there was that it still says that we have monthly meetings and they're bi-monthly. So, but yeah, how's the website going?
Thanks, Penny. Yes, we have had an overall workshop, which I think Giles attended that. We did send out some other invites to get different perspectives. And we're probably looking at 6 weeks to 2 months for the website to be fully operational. However, we have also agreed that within the next 2 weeks, we'll have a change to that current website, and there will be some functionality that will be altered and some further information. So that's definitely in hand. Level have got that definitely in hand. We have had what we're wanting to do though is with the full website is to begin to use it as an interactive tool as well, to collect information, to distribute information, to do all sorts of things that as well as it being just a sort of a repository of information for people to see, a communications tool. For example, there will be portals for people to download forms, to make applications for landowner grants. It'll be connected to Mardi grants. There'll be a whole range of things. There'll be graphs and things on it that will show our progress in terms of numbers of trees planted and those kinds of things. So we'll have quite a lot of functionality on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good on, Malcolm.
My question was on the website too. Just where's that at and what's happening there? And probably just one other thing to the side and around the appointment of roles and that. I recall we had an org chart quite some time ago, Alan. Is that structure still the same, or is there an updated version or org chart?
Yeah, we can. It's slightly. Well, we haven't appointed. We had on that one. We had one position there as a project coordinator, and we don't actually think we need that. So at this stage, so that may not be appointed to. And one of the things that we are talking about is the right connection between the workforce growth and innovation advisor and the iwi and communications advisor, because those two areas are coming together quite interestingly. And we're just what we want to do is to at some stage this week is to identify the number of candidates that we've got for different roles, because what we've done is we've got some quite incredible people and we're thinking, okay, they're good for this, but they're also good for this, and how can we actually do some mix and matching? So what we'd like to do is to come back with a suggested org chart and with identified names. My personal view about structure is that structure is there to serve us, not us to serve structure. So I'm quite flexible with recommending changes to structure if it's going to actually benefit the organisation and not cost anything more. So in fact, we think we can cost you less, but come up with a better way of actually configuring things and have some really, really good people doing some good stuff.
Yep. No, couple. I guess just for me, yep, and I agree with all what you're saying. It's just a visual for me,
Yeah,
to paint the picture.
Yeah, get something to you very soon, Malcolm. In fact, I can recirculate what we've got after this meeting, but then just bearing in mind that within the next week or two, there may be some slight adjustments to it. Certainly the top end of the structure, there's going to be no change. One of the things I haven't mentioned, but should have, is that we've also had Auckland Council recommend a couple of people as part of their in-kind contribution who may not be part of that structure, but can nevertheless be part of the Māori kura and do stuff. And there's a couple of people there who are very, very competent that we could utilise in specialist areas such as tree management and nursery management and nursery advice. And then another chap that could actually almost take a sort of a southern end catchment role of just keeping abreast of things happening there. So that wouldn't be a cost on the Māori kura. It's all ex budget, but at the same time, goes towards the in-kind contribution and adds enormous amount of value to what we're doing. So Healthy Waters have been very positive in terms of and generous in terms of what they've suggested there.
Kia ora, through the chair, Tame. Just querying on, if I recall, there was going to be a third pānui going out, and I only bring that up because if there's going to be a sort of say time lag with the website, it would maybe be good to do a pānui.
Yep.
Number 3, wouldn't it? It'd be number 3. I think.
Yep, Accreditation. Yeah. We had looked at the end of each month after the joint committee meeting, so we'll definitely be picking something up after this JC and then putting something out by the end of the month. Yeah.
Kia ora.
Are there any other comments?
Kia ora, Tami, Willie here. Just a comment, Alan. Thank you very much for the comprehensive report. I just want to make a general observation here to both you, Alan, and John Hutton and Duncan Cavell. It's been quite a road, and you're doing a brilliant job. You're doing a brilliant job. So I just want to make a comment that that it is complex. It is new. The arrangements of partnership are quite, well, that's very new. But I think, certainly from my point of view, you're on track, and you're considering all views, and in particular, Kaipara Udi's views, Mana Whenua views, and the like. We still haven't got there, but I just want to make that comment. Brilliant reports today, and getting better. Thanks, Tami.
Thanks, Willie.
Well, if there's no further comments, just also had an inquiry from Deborah Harrington from Water New Zealand, Alan, just along this communication line. They're wanting to run a story in their publication about Kaipara Moana remediation, but I might just refer her over to you guys, because they're quite detailed. The last time I was approached by them, they had some exhibition at Eden Park, and it gets quite like technical in their whole water space. A lot of it to do with infrastructure and the likes. But she sent me an email inquiring about the Kaipara Moana remediation, and it's offered some space in their publication, which I think closes 22nd of October or something. But I'll put it on an email to you. Something to follow up with, or might want to check it out as a regular feature of having a sort of update of the Kaipara Moana remediation program through that publication.
Kia ora, Tami, thank you. We'll have a look at that, and we'll be back to you with for the overall overview comments as well on that. And that reminds me too, one of the things I forgot to put on my report to you, I'm not saying about last time, but the conference that's being held that Duncan, John and Willie will go to and make a presentation. Duncan, do you want to just give a quick summary of that?
Kia ora, everyone. Yeah, it's the New Zealand Association of Resource Managers. We've heard that name mentioned a couple of times today. So it's ultimately it's the body of people, mainly in council, but not strictly. It's a 40 or 50-year-old, no, 66-year-old. 66-year-old association that developed from the Catchment Commission days, And then every year they host an annual conference, and it's become a really important slot in the calendar for people of like minds and careers to get together to see what's going on in the moto, learn from each other, network, and it's quite technical as well. So Willie got presented last time. We had a conference for his good work in the Kaipara, and he gets an opportunity to get on stage again and with myself and John, and we're developing we don't want to be at risk of COVID, so we're developing a video to play that will capture a lot of the kaupapa, the images of the Kaipara. It will capture our beautiful branding and the hard work we've done over this year, and put it into a video form so that we can use that on our website as well. And then we can present that, and then we get a question and answer forum on stage as well. So it's a real great opportunity to take it to the nation of people, mainly people in the same sort of jobs, and show the difficulty, the complexity, but also the really massive benefits from working in partnership of this project.
Thanks, Duncan.
All right, I'm sorted. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Any other comments?
That sounds really exciting, Duncan, to be able to be presenting at a conference. Kia ora, Willie, and would really like to see a copy of that presentation before you release it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other matters, questions? Any other matters to discuss, to raise? I'll leave the update on the Poutātaki interviews to Malcolm Nicholson. He's going through some fairly sensitive negotiations right now. And he'll contact the Joint Committee in due course with his conclusions, and we'll probably try and work alongside Alan to set something up for the 4th of November, the dedication of the Kaipara Māori Kura space, as well as the breakfast, joint breakfast together with our guests, and then an open session with the new staff, and hopefully the Poutātaki will be available, and may well be the opportunity we get to meet Danielle Hancock as well, face to face. But if there's nothing else, thank you one and all. We have created a record of completing a Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee meeting from 10 o'clock to 6 minutes past 12. Well done. Well done. Thank you very much for the paperwork and everything you keep this momentum going, and stay safe, everyone. Look after your families, yourselves, and hopefully we will be relieved of the suspense by the time the officials make their announcement later on this afternoon. But if there's nothing else, would like to close our meeting with a dedication. Kia ora tata. Kia tau anō kia tātou katoa, te arapai o tō tātou ari ki ai Ukraiti. Me te whiwhi ngātahi ki te wairi o tapu, mo ake. Āmine.
Amene.
Kia ora tata.
Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, everybody. Stay safe. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay, Amy.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Deal.
Amy Shulman. See you, Jane.
Take it out. Ring.
Yep.
Ka kite all. Take care.
Kia ora.
And I'll give you a call too, Ellen.